So just starting the recording now. And with that, a warm welcome to this webinar about reshaping the future of OKRs, where we want to look at 10 current trends and their impact in the current OKR environment. So my name is Natalija Hellesoe. I'm an organizational development and OKR coach, and I'm curious and also passionate about the role that goals play in our lives, privately and at work. And I think goals are just one of these central centerpieces that really can make a difference in how we spend our time, how we set our priorities, and what we do and what we focus on, and what maybe we say no to. So I think it's a really essential part that I'd also love to work with when it comes to organizations. And so I support organizations when it comes to getting into topics like OKRs, setting their priorities, building an organizational system that is a good fit to the goals that they're after, the way that they want to develop their organization. And I also engage a lot in education and community building when it comes to these topics. So educating roles like OKR coaches or OKR process owners, but also events like this when it comes to discussing trends with the community, getting feedback, getting new input, because all these topics are moving fast, things are changing fast these days. And I think it's important to not just keep up, but also always get some new insights, some new trends back into my work as well. And that's why I'm very happy that we're going to host this little webinar for you guys today, where we're going to share our view on how we see the current state and the future of OKRs. And we've handpicked 10 trends that we find are most important to look at when it comes to how do you use OKRs, and how can you maybe reshape how you use them in the future for even reaping more benefits that you currently do now. And with that, I want to get started with a couple words around goals. As I just said, they're kind of the central centerpiece in every organization and even maybe in everyone's life. And of course, they have been around for quite a while, and every organization is somehow working with goals. Many organizations are still looking at goals, though, from a traditional point of view when it comes to, how do we set goals? How often do we look at goals? And how do we work with goals in general? And then back in the 70s, there was this new kid on the block, right? The OKR framework was invented, started its journey from Intel over Google and the Silicon Valley out kind of in the world. And so the question that we want to kind of start to answer or discuss with you today is really, where are we in the OKR evolution? So coming from the first OKR adaptations, moving further into the next iteration of gaining new perspectives, adding maybe some other insights around OKRs, having first iterations on how to use them. Where are we then today? Have we already emerged kind of from these initial stages into something that we can properly use in organizations? Are we maybe at a point where OKRs are already kind of on the downgrade, or kind of where are we standing with them right now? And so to look at that, maybe just let's look into what we talk about when we talk about OKR to make sure that we're all on the same page. So those of you who have already engaged with OKR know that the idea behind OKRs is rather simple, right? You have long-term goals in an organization, so the purpose, the mission, the vision, the strategic topics that you set, and then you have the execution, so the daily tasks and decisions that you need to undertake. And often there is a huge gap between these two things. And so the basic idea of OKRs really is to bridge the gap between the long-term goals and the daily tasks and make it easier for people to know how to contribute to the long-term goals and define the next inspiring steps on that way. And they do that by exactly that. They use the objective to write down an inspiring description of the next step towards the purpose and vision, and combine that with measurable key results that look at the objective from different perspectives and measure a change in a relative or absolute value. And so together, an OKR set gives you a pretty good indication of where you are right now and what the next steps towards your long-term goal is, and what you as a company, as a department, as a team want to focus on in the next couple months. This is the part where OKRs talk about how we kind of write goals in maybe a different fashion compared to what we've done so far. But OKRs are not just that. OKRs are also fundamentally a way of working differently with goals. And this is where the iterative OKR cycle comes in, where we start with the OKR definition at the beginning, where we track the progress in regular OKR check-ins, learn and adjust on the way, and then end the cycle with the OKR reflection, looking back at our results and also around our collaboration when it comes to OKRs, and then make a decision and have a good foundation to start again with the OKR definition and define the next valuable step on the way towards our long-term goals based on what we know so far and what we have learned in the last cycle. And so what we want to look at today based on this view of OKRs is, if this is the simple idea, how have companies started to implement this idea and where are they standing right now? So we're going to look at what are the latest trends around OKRs, but we also want to look at what is the impact of these trends. Do we see them in a positive notion? Do we see them critically? So what is kind of our perspective on that? And we want to round it up with practical examples and also tips that you can take away in terms of what can you do to avoid maybe typical pitfalls, or how can you make use of these latest trends for you and your organization. And to do that, I'm not alone here today, but with me is my wonderful colleague, Cansel Sörgens, whom I want to hand over to now for the next part.
Thank you very much, Natalija. Great introduction to OKRs, what they are. And today we are, of course, tackling a little bit advanced topics. Myself, I'm also working as strategy and business coach, specialized in OKRs. And I've been working in digital product management for 14 years now. Observing all the people in these organizations, how they work with each other, how they collaborate with each other. Great people, smart people in the room, and then somehow they have difficulties when it comes to common goals, common collaboration ideas, which is why I decided to dedicate my work exactly in these kind of problems, to have a holistic approach to all of it, to see, okay, strategy execution is not only something that the teams needs to be doing, there is a lot of other factors in an organization that needs to play together with each other, so we have a healthy organization at the end. Of course, next to my work with my clients, I also voluntarily do these kind of events with Natalija together, but also some other colleagues, where we organize open space events, OKR lean coffees, and so on, which is helping me to get into conversation with lots of people from different contexts to understand what are the challenges we have with OKRs nowadays, right? And this is the collection of what we observed, Natalija and I observed in the last couple of years, and decided to put that all together and tackle them a little bit more in detail. Today, we want to give you an overview of those. And my first topic is, of course, the outcome and output topic. This is one of the most discussed topics, I guess, nowadays when it comes to OKRs. Why is that? Natalija already mentioned in the 70s there was this new kid in the block, OKRs, and the question we asked back then in the book of Andy Grove, when he developed the OKRs, objective and key results. His book even was called High Output Management, because it was the intention back then to ask the question, if these are our goals, what will we do to achieve our objectives? This is how the questions were asked to create the key results back then. Now, within these 10 days and 10 years in the last decade, it changed. We started reframing this question from what will I do to achieve my objective to how will I know that I'm achieving my objective, right? So it changed the whole game actually from output management to outcome management. And thanks to all these great experts worldwide, like Christina Wodke, Joshua Wyden, Jeff Gotthelf, Felipe Castro, they all have made a great influence and created that awareness around that topic. What does that mean for the ones maybe hearing for the first time what an outcome and output actually means? If I need to give an example, creating content, for example, right, might be one of our goals, and saying, okay, to reach people, to have more visibility, to get our ideas out there, to bring to the people our ideas, we decide to create content. This is a good thing. And usually when we will be now in the 70s, what we would be saying is, okay, let's write down blog posts, as many as we can, right? 4 blog posts per month, for example. This is something that proves me that I can improve my productivity in writing and creating content. But still, it doesn't tell me how my content is perceived, how it is consumed by the people that I am doing it for, actually. And this is the question we started asking it. How will I know that the content I'm creating is actually adding any value to the people I'm reaching for? Which brings me to my outcome-oriented key results. I can just change it and ask the question, how will I know that my blog post is generating value? There are many indicators for that. And one of those I just picked here is the views, how many times people saw it, read it, and maybe commented or shared it with others is a good indicator for me that I created a good content that resonates with the people. And this is exactly what we are going to focus on in the outcome-oriented key results. The key results should prove that the people resonate with the things we produce, we create for them, right? And a practical tip for that, to move the mindsets from output thinking to outcome thinking, is asking the question, how will you define the success of the output you are thinking about? Because it's always not always easy to start thinking in outcomes for a team. If you have a team with you, or if you think yourself, and it takes quite an easy time to create your output list, your to-do list, your project lists, you can get this team by asking the question, how will we know that it's successful what we are creating? Alone, this question will already give a good idea to the team to ask about who are we doing that for, and how do we know that they are consuming what we are creating for them, right? So this is one of the positive trends we are observing in the OKR sphere, that the movement from output to outcome is changing how we apply OKRs in the organizations a lot, the outcome-oriented thinking. Now, from the output to outcome, if we manage to get there, we are already in a good way. And let's imagine that we manage the teams to write the perfect outcome-oriented key results, right? And we have a couple of teams in an organization, let's say. How do we align those teams? How do we make sure that these teams work in the right outcomes that make sense for the whole organization altogether? And this is where the part comes in, I call it the strategy. Implementing OKRs or having great OKRs, outcome-oriented OKRs alone, is not helpful if we don't have a strategy to base it on. It needs a foundation, it needs a good ground for these OKRs to flourish, right? And this is where we need the strategy for, actually. Let me explain a little bit more what I mean in which organizational layers I see the strategy, actually. Most of the times what we see is that there's a purpose, the company decides why they do what they do, right? They have all these values. And then we have the vision. And then what we do is getting into planning our OKRs, and then getting into the initiatives. Initiatives meaning once we know what we are want to achieving in the next 3 to 4 months, then we create our roadmaps, our action items, our action plan kind of. But the missing gap is most of the times the strategy. And I asked the companies, your vision is clear, that's fine. We talked about it, and now you want the teams to do OKRs, but if we take the vision, which is quite for the long term, and now get to the teams for the 3 to 4 months OKRs, isn't the gap too high? Isn't the gap too, isn't that too abstract for the teams? How they should be contributing to the company's success. We need something there in between, and this is the most underestimated part of it all, which is the strategy. What actually are we going to focus strategically in the next 12 to 18 months? Now I ask the companies and I say, okay, we have a strategy, Cansel, don't worry about that. Now, okay, great, that's awesome, show it to me. What do you mean? How does your strategy look like? And I get answers like these. First of all, they show me their roadmap, their feature and project roadmap, for example, right? And then I see, okay, this is what you already decided to do, but why did you pick exactly these items in the roadmaps? Can you explain me what's the reason behind that actually, right? And there you see the gap, that the why is not clear enough for most of the leadership teams in that case. So I already recognize the strategy gap. The other thing they show me are the KPIs. And they say, of course, we have a strategy. We want to double our revenues. So that's great. That's also very noble. But tell me how you get there. What's your intention? What kind of ways are you going to follow up on to get to your target, doubling the revenues? There are many ways how you can double the revenues. Tell me what's your choice to get there, to get your to your target. The third one, what I quite frequently also see are these nice presentations of pillars showing us how great this organization is. There are great statements like, we have the greatest customer experience, we have the best talents in our organization, we excel at operational excellence, we are efficient and effective in everything. And if I'm honest, I could just exchange the logos and no one would realize it. No one would see that it's from a different company actually. So these are evergreen statements that are wishes, that it's good to have them written down somewhere, because it somehow gives us the signals, the description of who we are and what we value. That's great, but it's not a strategy. It doesn't show me what do we focus on exactly, what problems are we solving. The strategy should be a coherent and actionable set of choices of where we play and how we intend to win in a foreseeable future, right? This is a really strong sentence what I'm telling here, and this is influenced by many strategy influencers, strategy developers like Richard Rummelt, Roger L. Martin, and lately I've been looking into Simon Wardley, and this is what I gather from all of it together, right? Let me show you what I understand behind the idea of a strategy. It always starts with a situational awareness of the play field. Where are we actually playing? What is our market? Who are our customers? What is our competitive advantage? What are the problems and opportunities, or maybe trends in the market that we can turn it into our advantage? And what are our capabilities? So we need that kind of a situational awareness, first of all. And then, based on this situational awareness, we can decide what's our bet, what's our hypothesis to focus on in the next 12 to 18 months in a foreseeable future, that it's tangible enough that we can focus on and make use of the happenings in our play field, right? To turn it into an intention, how we believe how we can win in this market. We can sharpen our value proposition. We can think about our outcomes that show us that the clients or the target group is resonating with us in a long term, right? Once we have this strategic focus, which I call directional midterm goal, midterm focus, then it becomes easier for the teams to develop their ideas for the next 3 to 4 months, naming our OKRs. These are our short-term goals derived from the midterm goals, midterm strategy. And here we talk about our bets and hypotheses, our leading outcomes that we believe that would contribute to our strategic goal in the midterm. Now, all this, of course, gives us the idea on what should we be working on. Then we create our roadmap, our action plan. And all of that together, we don't do it just because it's fun. Of course, we do it because we want to have the company successful, and we, at the end, find our business results. All of it, what we are doing, should pay into our business metrics, our business KPIs, which is on the top of the layer. All right, now, we have a great strategy, we have great outcome-oriented OKRs, but how do we connect it? How do we bring it into the organization? And Natalija is going to talk about some ideas there.
Yes, so given that we have the understanding that outcomes are important, we did the exercise Cansel just mentioned, we have the strategic foundation, then it's easy, right? We just kind of break it down into our departments, into smaller goals, and execute on them. And I think this is where a certain trend also comes into play, where the understanding really rises and luckily improves also in the OKR community, that OKRs don't cascade, but they actually align. So the basic idea behind OKRs is not that you take overarching goals from your midterms, break it down into 3 or 4 month goals, and then cascade them down. And then even worse, maybe use the key results as objectives just for the next level and have people come up with measurement criteria that somehow match these artificial objectives. So what we're trying to avoid is that we take the long-term goals and then just basically build OKR sets mapped to the org chart, where we kind of just copy paste the organizational structure that we have and cascade them down from top to bottom. This is not the fundamental idea really of OKRs, but the fundamental idea of OKRs that luckily more organizations kind of turn back towards, because they have maybe even experimented with that kind of alignment and seen that that doesn't really change the organization in the direction that they wanted to change, is to go back to the principle of participation. So meaning that we have a combined approach of top down and bottom up in a balanced way, where we value the feedback from lower departments, from teams, from other people that already kind of inform the choices. How would we set the overarching goals or maybe even the midterm goals, and where we then in a balanced process actually align what we're after. So participation is, I think, one of the fundamental principles that we want to keep in mind when we talk about OKRs. Next to continuous improvement, coming back to also what Cansel just said, we want to make sure that we keep that in mind, not just for OKRs, but also for our strategies and all the relating topics, that we do that in short cycles with also the goal of transparency. Always combine the inspiration and measurability and do that to also give orientation to people. And so when it comes to the alignment process, what that fundamentally means is that we align horizontally and vertically, and that an OKR, the structure then can also is more based on how do these goals then contribute to our long-term goals? What is their interrelation, rather than how do we have an org structure set up and how is now the goal structure looking alike? So what we want to make sure is that we take both these directions into account, the horizontal one, the vertical one, and set up processes that actually allow for a bigger part of participation, where people contribute, where we get the shared perspectives and also all the different perspectives on what is maybe important, what we need to take into account to make better and informed choices also, for example, on a company level. And speaking of OKR architectures, that's another trend that we seen in the community, that people are starting to mix it up, right, Cansel?
Right, exactly. What we knew before we started exploring different kind of architectures, it was just a simple cascading model that Natalija just showed us, that it goes from the company level to division to business unit and then the teams. And this is not the reality anymore, because the companies, the organizations themselves realize that they have a more complex network actually within the organization, which means we can use the OKRs as a chance to reflect this kind of networking, to reflect this kind of collaboration within the organization, which is not always reflected by the organizational charts we have officially. Now, to get your idea executed and validated, to get the strategy validated, you just need actually one unit, which is the team. Whoever is in this team, right? Whatever this team makes, that's what it counts when it comes to understanding what kind of architecture possibilities do we have actually when it comes to OKRs. Which another possibility is to OKRs. Let's assume we have a product. We can start with the product team. We can start, when we create the product, to create the OKRs for that product, first of all, right? Based on the strategy derived from the midterm strategic goal. Now, what I see quite often is that we have lots of many sub-product teams working on the main product actually. They all have the same goal, but what I see is that we have many sub-product teams having their OKRs, but not actually aligned on the product OKR. So I would like to change that game and say, okay, let's start rather what's our product vision, strategy, and what's the OKR in the next 3 months. And then every team can decide either they do OKRs or they just derive their work depending on the product OKR that they were involved in co-creation of that OKR, right? So this is one part. We can have product-driven OKRs, and then the sub-product teams can work towards these OKRs. Now, in this, on the other hand, we have teams like marketing. They can do also standalone their own OKRs when it comes to creating new partnerships, finding new affiliate partners, and so on. This is something they can do standalone, autonomously, derived, of course, from the strategy, company strategy again. But again, if the product teams and the marketing teams are not collaborating with each other, then we have a problem again. So it makes definitely sense that these two divisions, these two teams are in close contact with each other and aligning their OKRs accordingly, right? Another good possibility is that we have a topic, we have a strategic theme for which we don't have a dedicated team yet. We don't know who could work on that because it's a brand new green field in the organization that we want to explore, right? This is something new. So why not bringing voluntary people that are interested for this topic, plus interested in trying out OKRs, then we can bring them together to a mixed virtual OKR team to work on that strategic theme for a while. And then let's see what happens out of this topic. Maybe it's becoming part of our organization that we create a dedicated team to that. Or maybe we see that the topic just, it was enough for now, and we can keep it dynamic as possible. Depending on the phase of the strategic theme, we can always reassess who do we need in that team? What skills do we need in the team? And so we can have a dynamic changing team in that area. Another possibility is, which is more or less influenced by Felipe Castro, the shared OKR part, right? In this case, we have already dedicated teams, and we see that we have a goal on which all these teams should be working together, actually. So we have many interdependencies between these teams. And instead of forcing each team to create their own OKRs, even though they have to wait for the other team to provide something else in order for them to move forward, why not just bring them together in a shared OKR context and say, okay, we have this huge campaign we want to follow up on, and we need these teams together, or we are opening new offices in a new country, for example. Why not bringing these teams together to work on that shared OKR together, right? So this, what I'm showing here is we are not forced to our organizational charts we have there. Not every team has to do these apply OKRs as a team as they are in the organizational chart, but we rather should be asking ourselves, what kind of topics do we have? What kind of people do we have in our organizations? And how can we use it in a most meaningful way, right? The aim is not that everyone is doing OKR. The aim is that we are using OKR for learning, and we should be applying it in that meaningful way. How can we learn as fast as possible? All these teams bringing that together, especially this mixed OKR teams or these shared OKR teams who should be starting collaborating with each other, requires a different kind of touch, a different kind of team development, which my colleague Natalija is going to talk about right now.
Yes, and speaking of development, speaking of organizational learning, that is one topic, or maybe one reason why many organizations are also starting to look into OKR. Unfortunately, kind of the misconception is often that if you start to work with OKRs, this type of development will somehow magically happen. But I think, as we all learned in practice, development is not a framework, and development will not just magically happen because you adapt a new framework. So I think what we're looking into is, these are kind of the typical reasons why OKRs are kind of being started in organization. They often look into more focus, better alignment, more autonomy, autonomous decision-making in the teams, faster learning cycles, that it's more important to have meaningful contribution and a perspective for everyone, and that we want to focus more on value creation, what we mentioned in the beginning. Unfortunately, what is often the case is that people view OKRs as this kind of simple cure to cure all of these problems. And I think that's where often the misconception and also the challenge starts when it comes to OKR implementation, that OKRs and the idea behind it is simple, but it's definitely not a simple cure for all these topics. It can, of course, help and support a development that moves you more into that direction. But for that, it's very important to look at OKRs as what they are, meaning a part of your organizational system. OKRs are not just a standalone concept or tool that you also apply when you have an extra 5 minutes every month, but it's something that is an essential part of everything you're doing in the organization, where with the definition of goals, you kind of also set the stage and the direction for everything else. And this is the big benefit, but also the big challenge at the same time. Big benefit because OKRs can serve as a catalyst for organizational development, meaning when you start to change the way that you work with goals and set goals in a different fashion and also use different content for your goals, then of course that has a big impact on all the other elements in your organizational system. But unfortunately, of course, the same is true in reverse, right? So the structure that you have, the way that you deal with leadership or you take over responsibility, how you structure compensation and benefits, for example, and how you collaborate will also have an effect on your OKR system as well. And you need to keep that in mind when you look at then the relation of OKRs and how they can serve as a catalyst. So OKRs are not kind of a final means towards solving a problem, but they can be a great supporter or enabler if you use them correctly in relation to all the other organizational elements and development as well. So looking at that, when you really have kind of a realistic view also on this interdependence, so the catalyst function to the outside, but also the dependence on the status quo and how your organization is working, I think it becomes obvious, and that is what many companies are also kind of experiencing, especially in the first steps with OKRs, that there are certain limitations in place when it comes to how you work with OKRs that are not inherent in the concept. But for example, many companies then tell you it takes way too much time, right? There are so many new meetings, people discuss in endless discussions around priorities and all that, and it just takes up way too much time. And of course, there might be a certain potential within the OKR concept to address that. But what is more often the case is if you have a proper foundation of knowledge and experience around OKRs, you need to look at the outer skirts of this organizational system to see, okay, what is maybe then the reason behind that? And often case, it's still existing silos in your organization that make it really hard for the alignment to actually take place. It's about maybe missing communication lines between the different teams and departments, or maybe also an issue with taking over the self-responsibility and accountability when it comes to their teams. And so as long as you don't pay attention to these challenges in the other organizational elements, you will have a really hard time developing your OKR approach further as well. And that's why if you want to increase the likelihood of success for your OKR implementation, you always need to consider the individual development parts. So what is changing around, for example, roles and responsibility, about the accountability part, about how people, for example, work together, where individual coaching or training, for example, play a huge part. You need to consider the team development part, so actively creating an environment to thrive with OKRs. So what are the foundations you have in the team? How do you work together? How do you integrate OKRs into your daily routines and so on? And then last but not least, also the organizational development. So actively designing and creating these connections to the other organizational elements and making sure that the development in these different areas work together towards a shared goal and not against each other. And if you do all that, I think it becomes obvious that OKRs will not just magically develop your organization, but they can be a great foundation and a great mirror towards what needs to be addressed and how you can work with all these other elements in order to actually move your organization forward. When we now look beyond OKRs, and I just mentioned that one important part is how do we then create them and how do we connect them to the execution? This is another important area where we see some trends happening, right?
Exactly. In the execution part, I see lots of parallel universes happening there, unfortunately. And I hope we can change that in the next upcoming years. What happens is I find in an organization many different frameworks. Let's start with Scrum, SAFe, design thinking, Kanban. We do all of these. These are great methodologies, great frameworks that all have its reasons. They are all useful. But when it comes to combining them, we have the trouble with that. What I see is that we start renaming the existing artifacts we have in an organization with the names, with the terminology we have in the new frameworks. In terms of OKRs, what happens is that the project is renamed to an objective, or an epic, a feature is renamed as an objective. And this is not the idea behind it, right? Or a key result is not a milestone in a project plan. It's not a user story. It's not a task in the sprint backlog, for example. So we need to be aware of these things. We need to assess, why do we have these frameworks? What was the reason we want to start using these frameworks? And if we start with OKRs, how can we combine them? So we should be making ourselves aware of that. If we have an execution framework for our outputs and now start using OKRs to define our outcomes, our product or service outcomes, why do we do these things? Then we need to put them into the puzzle parts like they fit to each other, right? And not like in a parallel universe, one team does OKRs and they don't touch, have no connection with OKRs or Scrum. Now, again, when it comes to execution part, what I also observe is that suddenly everyone starts using OKRs and everyone does that for everything, because we have this urge to have that everything fits to each other. Everything is, we have one framework for everything, right? So it starts to becoming kind of forcing the organization to use OKRs in every team, in every area, for everything. And here I want to make everyone aware of a framework. It's called Kinefin framework, developed by Dave Snowden. Most of the times, the urge for agile methodologies like Scrum comes actually from the domains we are working on, which is rather complex domains. We don't know the cause and effect relationship. We can only see that in retrospective, right? We only have an assumption, an idea, and then probe it, sense it, measure it with key results, and then respond to it. This is a great area, experimentation and learning area, where we can apply OKRs. But if we are in a complicated area where the cause and effect is known already, where we just need the expertise put into the context and do the right things that are known for many years, or there are many best practices, we can't just do it wrong. If we have the expertise there, the solution is known, then we can apply other type of methodologies. For the experimentation part, where we need to learn, where we can't be sure if the solution is the right one we are assuming, where the solution needs to emerge, then we need to apply OKRs rather. So what I'm saying here is rather, assess your situation, assess the context you are moving in. Is it rather a complicated or a complex issue? And then decide what framework would be more suitable for which problem you are solving.
Right. So speaking of decisions, and I think we already talked about a lot of decisions that kind of needs close consideration when we talk about OKRs. And I think this is where the simple idea starts to get a little more challenging, right? That it needs a lot of assessment, a lot of pre-perspective, so to speak, to really find the environment where we want to use OKR and where they can actually be beneficial. And one of these decisions, maybe a minor one, but something that might be quite big for many organizations, is defining a useful OKR cadence, right? So when we started with the framework, it was kind of inherent that we were talking about a quarterly 3 months cadence, and that's what we use OKR for. Now, over the course of the last couple of years, organizations started to experiment with different approaches to that. So some might have found that they work in an environment where 2 months lightweight OKR approach might work better because their pace of change is so high that otherwise they would just need to reiterate their OKRs continuously. So especially maybe in a startup environment or in a tech environment, some companies actually make quite good results when it comes to a 2 month lightweight project OKR cadence. On the other hand, some other organizations find that a trimester approach, so a 4 month OKR approach, actually serves them better, especially if you have many different layers or complex organizational structures. And so making alignment actually happen is maybe also a time and resource issue, and that might be a possible solution. What we, of course, want to make sure if we talk about cadences and similar decisions is that we don't sacrifice the underlying principles. So of course, you don't want to start to do OKRs for 12 months because it kind of fits your budget process, but you still want to keep working in these short iterations, but look into, okay, what is then a setting that actually works well for me and is a good balance between short iteration, time and effort to put into that, and still being able to move fast enough to also change your goals according to the changing environment. And speaking of all these decisions, it's always about finding the approach that works best for you. That's why experimenting with all these different variables is a key thing, especially when you start to work with OKRs. And it will also never be kind of done. Like, you will not have your final and best OKR approach in the beginning, and you will probably also not have it after 2 or 3 years of experimentation, because the environment you're working in with OKRs might currently, or basically all the time, be changing as well. And that brings me to the second last trend that I quickly want to talk about, which is the role of internal or even external OKR coaches, process owners, and ambassadors. So any kind of designated role around OKRs. The interesting thing is, in the beginning, when organizations started to work with OKRs, designated roles were not a thing. They just started to kind of experiment with that and kind of rolled them out. But what we then saw is kind of a move into the discussion. So who's got then the OKR head on? Who is then responsible for the result? Which, of course, the initial idea of OKR states the goal achievement should be a team effort, or then an effort for the entire company. Who is then responsible for the OKR process, especially if you have a more complicated and bigger setup? And who is then also responsible for creating the right environment? And so what we've seen over the time, when we look into the development of the different roles, is that many companies start to understand that just doing OKRs without any support for the team often does not fly. And many educate and build internal support and roles. And many companies also see the need to establish a process owner, at least in the beginning. So somebody that has kind of the big picture view, that oversees the implementation and also has a feeling and also the competency to design these relations that we talked about to the other organizational elements. The impact that has is that many companies start to really increase their OKR maturity and actually implement the idea of OKRs rather than just kind of changing the headline from traditional goals to OKRs. But there again, it's important to find an individual solution and individual responsibilities and inspect and adapt on how you want to work with them, especially depending on, for example, if you also work with Scrum and how to combine that with their roles, if you work differently. And another impact that we see is that there's still little theoretical knowledge and that that's not enough to just support the teams, but that you actually need people who have a lot of practical experience and who can actually help out the teams in working best with OKRs, getting the most benefit out of that instead of just moderating a goal definition process. And so a couple tips that we can maybe, or just a couple questions that we can share when you're already working with OKRs is, just ask yourself, do you already have the clarity of who is responsible for the process? Do you actually see OKRs, and I mean in the fundamental idea in your teams, or rather tasks lists? And can your internal roles actually support the teams in all the practical processes and aspects and challenges that come with OKRs? Or would it maybe be helpful to kind of ramp up your education around that as well? Because what we see, and this just as an example, when we look into what are then, for example, typical competencies when it comes to OKR coaches, it's not just the OKR knowledge and the practical application, but it's a lot about coaching and teaching, facilitation, looking into the change aspects, and last but not least, also a question of personal development when it comes to that. So I think that's one of the topics that is also underestimated when it comes to OKRs, is the complexity and also the level of competency and education that you need to actually make a positive impact when it comes to supporting the teams in the OKR process. And so what I often recommend is that you start with a shared foundation, that you then build the OKR competencies on top of that, but that you then really focus on the practical application, that OKR coaches are exposed, for example, to many different teams, and that they gain their experience and then bring them back to the teams. And that brings me to the last trend that we want to share with you before we take the final minutes also for Q&As, which is the never-ending story of Big Bang implementations, right? Like, so often we also get requests like, we want to implement the OKRs in our company, let's do it. And then the expectation is that we then say, great, let's put together a 12-month rollout plan and accelerate the growth of your company in no time, right? That's the headline, that's the expectation that is out there. And what we want to make sure, and what we still see happening from our point of view way too often in organizations is that organizations don't use the OKR principles to implement OKR, which we find is really crucial if you want to change the way that you're working with goals, to actually do that based on the principles that you want to implement in the long term. So coming back to what I just mentioned before, the short cycles, the continuous improvement, and the like. So 2 tips I want to share with you as a last bit here is, how can you do that? You can, first of all, define the OKRs for your OKR implementation. That will already maybe give interesting insights also around what you're actually after, what your goals are, where you are aligned on what you want to achieve and where not, and to really constantly inspect and adapt the OKR system after every cycle. So not set it up and be done with it, but continuously iterate it with the learnings that you have from each cycle. And so to sum it up, if we want to look at the trends, maybe in a nutshell that we shared with you, a lot has happened over the last 10 years. OKRs, I think, is moving into a good environment, in a good direction. And at the same time, we see a lot of usage of OKRs that actually doesn't reap the benefits and is maybe rather even unpromising or even disturbing for also the positioning of the concept. So what I would like to share with you is know your options. And there are a lot more options out there when it comes to the architecture and the usage and so on. Know your organizations and create a first draft that you continuously improve based on that. There is no need to have one standard for everyone and everything, but really make a conscious choice on where it's beneficial and where it's not. Same goes for the scaling. So kind of nail it before you scale it. So don't give in to the existing patterns of implementation, but build the implementation on the Agile principles from the beginning, even if that might hurt and might be a big change. And don't build OKRs as a parallel universe, but really actively design the connections with the other organizational elements and integrate OKRs into your business routines. And with that, I want to thank you a lot for listening to us, and we want to open the floor for Q&As. But before we do that, a quick mention. This was an overview of trends that we see in the community, and Cansel and I want to continue to have these discussions in the community, want to look into different ways of applying OKRs. So we want to start kind of an event series looking into all these different topics that we shared today in more detail. And so we we'll just post the link also to our LinkedIn group in the chat, where you can actively participate in that discussion, where we will also share the next events. And we're really looking forward to feedback and fresh perspectives on that, because I think together we can really reshape the future of OKRs and make it something that really supports organizations in their development. And now the floor is open for Q&A, so feel free to put them in the chat or also unmute yourself then and raise your hand when it comes to that.
I see in the chat we already have 2 good questions. I would like to address the first question to you, Natalija. Even it can be a test and learn development. Is there some prerequisites you consider that can foster the new use of the OKRs? What do you think?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of discussion out there around what are the prerequisites? Do we need to have certain things in place before we actually get started with OKRs? I would like to answer it that way. I think for me, a basic understanding of, first of all, complexity and agility is a must. Like if I don't see any need to change the ways that we currently work with and understand, for example, the basics around complexity that you also just shared, it's really hard to kind of build on that with OKRs. The other thing is a clarity around which problem we're actually trying to solve with OKRs. Like every time I see OKRs implemented without clarity around that, it will go wrong somehow, because you don't have a foundation for the change communication, for making it relevant for everyone, and for actually also a conscious choice of how you want to use OKRs. Because with all the variations out there, what do you want to optimize your OKR approach for? You need to have a clear goal for that as well. And last but not least, also a certain level of time and mental capacity commitment, I would say. I think I'm not so much interested in to have already the perfect strategy or the perfect setup and whatnot, but I think you need to be aware that if not all of that is in place, you need to make more iterations, and you will probably start with something that is not perfect, and that implementing OKRs is not a sprint. You will not get all these benefits just by doing that for 3 months, but you need a certain commitment to test it out, to iterate it, to improve it. I would say for at least 3 to 4 cycles. If you don't have a commitment for that, I would not recommend you to get started, because then you just invest a lot in the beginning, but will probably not follow up on that.
Absolutely, I totally agree. There's another question. It goes about the strategy. From your point of view, is there a first step to involve people in firm strategy, or you will use OKR to help people to be involved in strategy? If you don't mind, I would like to answer that question. I think strategy was till now something that we expect from our executives to do, right? We can break these beliefs and say, why don't we involve people from other levels that are close to customers, that I know that they know which problems we are facing right now. From those people, we get a lot of insights that is important when we create the strategy. So let's make the strategy creation process a co-creation process which affects the whole organization, right? And the first step would be to think about people in the organization who could have these kind of insights, even though they are not in the executive team, in the board, for example. So business analysts, product managers, who is doing continuous interviews with the clients out there, people from customer service, customer success. All these people have great insights that needs to be considered when we talk about our strategy. So this could be a great first step already. And then when we start creating our OKRs, based on this strategy, of course, the people will gain more and more information about why they do what they do, right? And this is the continuous part of the things where we train the muscles of becoming more strategic thinkers in the whole organization.
Absolutely. And we've got another question here, is if we suggest using a tool to manage OKRs. So there's always got to be the tool question, right, in every event, because of course it's important, and at the same time it's not. What do I mean with that? I think the relevance of a tool is often overestimated, especially in the beginning when you work with OKRs. Of course, I understand the urge to look into tool selections, especially if you're a larger organization. At the same time, when you start working with OKRs, I believe you also just need to learn first what kind of tool would actually help you in your OKR processes. Because speaking of it today, 2022, there are, I don't know, hundreds or even thousands of different OKR tools and applications out there. So how do you select the ones that are actually helpful for you? I think for that, you need some solid, practical experience. If you already have that and want to engage in the selection, I always recommend to have different tools tried out. So don't make it a theoretical exercise of picking a tool and then rolling it out to thousands of people, but rather have different teams experiment with maybe different tools and then select the one that best fits your needs. And then, of course, if you're a larger organizations, tool can be a great addition to make things visual, to make things more transparent, to make the goals easily accessible. But I would also want to make you aware, or I think that's an important thing to mention, don't rely too much on the tool. The process should still be about the conversations happening, about the discussions, about the decision that you make on your priorities. And the tool should just be a nice addition that helps you in the process, but it should not be the main focus point, for example, also in the check-ins, right? So to sum it up, get some practical experience first, then select something that kind of fits your need and don't make it about the tool too much.
Great, awesome. Thank you very much, everyone. I also see in the chat that people thanking for our presentation. And if we have a recording and if we share this recording, we don't promise, we might. Just follow us in the Reshaping LinkedIn group. If we have a recording to share, then we will be sharing it in this group. So follow me or Natalija or join this LinkedIn group, and let's stay in touch for the future events. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us.
Thank you, and have a wonderful evening.
Have a wonderful evening.